The Edmonton Oilers dominated play in Game 1, but were shut out by the Florida Panthers. Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers is here to talk about what happened in Game 1 and what needs to happen going forward for the Oilers to get back in the series. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Oilers, Nick Zararis. And Nick, tough loss in Game 1. The Oilers almost outshot Florida 2-1. Had some great chances, but were shut out 3-0. What's the biggest reason for this loss in Game 1?
Bob, it's that straightforward. But Bobrovsky had been relatively quiet. He had a few nice games against the Bruins. He had one decent game against the Rangers. But this is very different from the Panthers team of last year, which was a lot more chaotic, a lot more dependent on Bobrovsky to make things happen for them. And he was fine. It's not like he was part of the problem or anything to this point, but that was the first really, truly dominant game Bobrovsky's had all playoffs. You go 0 for 3 on the power play in spite of all the good looks, as you mentioned, almost outshooting them 2-1. They peppered him. I mean, the first look of the game, Hyman has that look 15 seconds into the game, and Bob's already on his back. So you never want to take too much away from one game, especially one like that, where it's clear one player's just kind of on their game in a given moment. So you want to take a step back. You want to breathe. It's very frustrating because by all accounts, that's a game you should win. You had the looks. You just didn't beat the goalie, and that's going to happen. But you can't let that deter you, and you can't let that get in your head because we've seen that happen. You know, a great goalie gets into a rhythm and the other team starts trying to overpass the puck into the net, one too many passes, and they start losing what made them effective in the first place. I don't think we'll see that from Edmonton. I think they understand what it's going to take because otherwise you like their game. They kept Florida on their heels for long stretches of the game. Florida's goals, a little on the ugly side, preventable mistakes, but that's going to happen. Florida's really good. So it's not just an Oilers thing. It's not just the Panthers thing. It's how those two things are interacting, really. So I'll be very curious to see if Edmonton is able to keep the tempo the way it was, because I do think that helps them. If the game is up and down, back and forth, kind of the way it was, I do think that helps them against a Florida team that individually talented, but if you force Florida's defensemen to actively play defense, I do think there'll be advantages there.
Evan Bouchard officially had 4 shots on goal, but he had more than 14 shot attempts. What did the Panthers do to limit Bouchard's offensive effectiveness in this game?
They put pressure on him. This is something they do a really good job of whoever's at the point. They get heat really quick as soon as they enter the zone. They did a really good job of this against the Rangers as well last round, putting pressure on guys like Adam Fox at the top, putting pressure on guys like Mika Zibanejad. So that's the key for Florida's game. If they want to put pressure on you and make you make a decision before you really want to. And I do think some of that is, I don't want to call it desperation, but, you know, they're down in the game. They need looks, and Bouchard has the puck and feels, okay, I can do something here. And that's really what it is. It's only game 1. They were trailing by 2 for a good chunk of the game, but a little desperation. You feel like you have a decent look. You want to put the puck on the net just in case, because you get the rebound, the deflection. You can make more things happen just by throwing the puck at the net. But Florida blocks shots really well. You know, that's something Edmonton's going to have to do a better job of getting used to. It's something that I think Edmonton might have trouble with at times, of accepting they're going to have to cycle the puck and try and force Florida into breaking down their defensive structure. Because if you just let Florida get set up, it is really hard to break through.
Connor McDavid, a -2 in this game, 6 shots on goal, had his chances as well. But how big of a concern is it that his line was on the ice for allowing as many goals as it did?
It's funny you bring that up because that happened quite a few times in the Vancouver series and in the Dallas series where you catch them and force them to play defense. That's really the only way you're stopping Connor McDavid is if he's on the ice and he doesn't have the puck a lot. There was one game in the Vancouver series where him, Hyman, and Draisaitl played the entire game together, and they finished the game a -3. So that type of thing happens to them, where if you put pressure on McDavid and Draisaitl, make them play defense, that's how you slow them down. You're not really going to contain them, as you mentioned, a lot of shot attempts, especially on the power play, where they run the power play through McDavid. So definitely something to keep an eye on. I thought Florida did a nice job of trying to force them into playing defense, of dumping the puck in behind them, forcing them to organize, regroup, and then break out. All you're trying to do when he's out there is delay it, make him work hard to create offense. And then if you get beat, you get beat. But I thought Florida did a solid job on him. But that's definitely a fair critique of McDavid and Draisaitl in these playoffs, that on occasion, you've been able to catch them by forcing them to play defense. And the first goal, that's a rush opportunity. Nurse and CC both missed their checks. They had 2 chances to break up the first goal, the Verhaeghe goal. And then the third one, same deal. CC goes to the corner. He could have killed the puck in the corner, and it gets through Nurse, who, if he has his stick on the ice, breaks up that pass. So I definitely think you can exploit McDavid and Draisaitl respectively by making them play defense. But at the same time, Florida's good. It's going to happen. They're going to get pressure, and it's unfortunate the goals happen the way they do because Skinner is a lot better when the Oilers are playing with a lead. When they play with a lead, he's a lot more comfortable. And I didn't think either of the goals he conceded last night were poor.
No.
But you want to give him a little bit of a chance to ease into the game. And I thought they did a good job of not putting too much pressure on him. It's just unfortunate they couldn't find the back of the net and kind of relieve some of that pressure on him.
You know, we're talking about what was difficult for Edmonton, what went wrong, but what went right, because they dominated the pace of this game for most of it.
They had the puck a lot. They did a really good job. And this was my main concern coming into the series. They broke out of their zone really well. They got clean regroups. Something Edmonton does that not a lot of teams do is their forwards will often break the puck out of their own zone, where they will come back around on a regroup, get possession, and then start building up speed through the neutral zone to try and get, a real good head start of skating to put pressure on the other team in the neutral zone, force them to move around. I thought Edmonton did a really nice job of breaking out cleanly, not asking Skinner to do a whole lot, and not putting a lot of pressure on their own defense. Because if we're going to be honest, that's probably Edmonton's weak link in this series is they need to get from defense to offense quickly. Because if they have to actively play defense for long stretches, they're going to have a hard time. Last night, they did a great job of breaking out clean, getting to offense, and forcing Florida to defend. That's really the key to this series in my mind, is who does better in transition. You mentioned it. Edmonton, really good in transition, really fast. They had the puck a lot, and the game had a really high tempo to it, something that at times hasn't suited Edmonton. In the Vancouver series, when Vancouver was going really fast, that was putting a lot of pressure on Edmonton's defense. But last night, it worked out really well for them. They just didn't put the puck in the net.
So what else has to happen for Edmonton to get in the win column and even this series up on Monday night?
Going to need an ugly goal. I think that's the key this time of year, especially when you're playing a really good goalie. You go and look what Florida did to Shesterkin. You got to have guys in the kitchen all around him, deflections, rebounds, second chance. You're not going to beat Bob clean for the most part, especially because, as we just talked about, they block a lot of shots. You're going to have to find ways to get him moving left to right or traffic in front where he can't see it. And that's a tough ask. Florida's really physical down low. Their defensemen are well equipped to clear the crease. But if you want to beat a really good goalie who's playing well, you're going to have to find an ugly one. And that typically gets the engine going. Once you get that one, you get, okay, we can score on this guy. Now let's keep this going. That's the key for Edmonton. Just get one and you go from there.
Do you think an ugly goal is something that you would see from McDavid or Draisaitl or Hyman, or is that someone further down the depth chart, so to speak, who might be able to spring that?
Of those three, Hyman is the one guy who will go to the net front and he'll just eat the cross check over and over again to occupy that space, because he knows if he stands there long enough, McDavid's going to find him and he's going to have a really good scoring chance. Last night he had, I would say, 3 or 4 really good looks and just couldn't find one.
All right. Well, Nick, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find the podcast and where they can find you on social media?
Thank you very much. Locked On Oilers every day. Gonna go record an episode later for you guys for Monday. So you'll have that. And on Twitter at Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis. Thank you very much, Gil.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more. You could bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you could use to bet everything from the NBA Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. And hockey fans, you could use your knowledge of the NHL on FanDuel. You could bet on who's going to win tonight's Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final, who's going to win the series, or maybe even who's going to win the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoff MVP. You can get all the latest odds on that and more at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.